And it looks like we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to Storytime Network. Today we'll be discussing Dune. Ah, crap, I didn't change the title. Oh, well.
Yes.
Specifically...
So dunes are sand mountains?
Specifically, we'll be discussing the first book in Frank Herbert's trilogy and not trilogy, book series, and the Denis Villeneuve adaptations thereof.
Yeah. Trilogy is not actually that inaccurate because, like, the 6 Dune books form two pretty,
Concise.
well, not distinct, but yeah, they form two trilogies. Like, they can be understood as two trilogies. Of course, there are 6 books that belong together, but like in Germany, the first 3 are marketed as Dune, the first trilogy.
Yep, that tracks. So, what's your experience with Dune?
Oh boy. My first exposure to Dune was when I was about, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years old, maybe. I saw the David Lynch movie. We owned it on VHS. Didn't understand jack shit, but awesome imagery. First time I read the book was when I was about 14, 15-ish, I want to say. And I basically have read it once a year since then.
Hot damn, you have a polar opposite experience from me. Because I first read Dune in its entirety earlier the same year that the first Villeneuve movie came out. I actually listened to it via audiobook because I was having a hard time actually just sitting down and reading it because, thank you, ADHD.
Understandable. No, it's also just very dense material.
It's very dry, too, pardon the joke.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
But yes.
So I think just to get things rolling here a bit, Dune is often and rightfully so, in my opinion, compared to Lord of the Rings, like what Lord of the Rings did for fantasy, Dune did for science fiction.
Yep.
As in, it didn't necessarily invent a lot of new things, but it recontextualized them and just put them in a framework that is very rich and can be adapted very easily.
From what
much like Lord of the Rings, Dune is incredibly dense, and it doesn't make sense that it's popular at all.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to read, much like Tolkien.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Dune is also not as much of a straightforward story as Lord of the Rings.
No, absolutely not.
It is very politically dense, and also probably the most misinterpreted text of all time, or at least in the top 10 easily.
Maybe so. Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, no, that's the thing with Frank Herbert's writing style. It's very I wouldn't even say dry, even though that's certainly not wrong and also a good pun.
I make
the thing
no apologies.
Is Frank Herbert. No, you don't have to. Not for this one, at least. Frank Herbert was a journalist, and you can read that. Like, he's very much telling you events. He's not even telling you a story necessarily. Like, parts of it are not particularly engaging. Like, I don't need to read 5 pages about the speck of blood on the horn of a bull trophy from 5,000 years ago. I don't need that, but
look, I love world building as much as I love world building as much as the next guy, but good God, Frank Herbert.
Yeah, I think
there's such a thing as going too far.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there obviously wasn't an editor around.
Editors, what are those? Frank Herbert, probably.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely not an easy read. But it gets worse as the books continue.
From what I have heard, there are several possible stopping points. Either the first book is a good stopping point, the second book is a good stopping point, or the third book is a good stopping point, and nothing after the third book is worth reading at all.
Yeah. My dad had a beautiful collection of all 6 books. Back then, all 6 books. Today, there's a lot more because, much like Tolkien's estate, Frank Herbert's estate is putting out shit. But my father had a beautiful collection of the 6 books, and the first one was completely read to pieces. Like you could barely hold it together when you were reading it. And the second one was pretty well read, and the third one had a few marks on the spine, and the 4, 5, 6 have never been touched. Like no one in our household ever touched those books.
Not even read them once.
No. Like started the fourth one once, and that's it. Like I never touched the fifth and sixth one, and I think my father didn't even touch the fourth one. So those remain unread. And I'm not gonna say they're bad. I haven't read them, but I will say that the story lost me somewhere in the third book.
Personally,
yeah.
I never felt compelled to read past the first book because of the difficulty with reading the book in the first place, and also just like I got the message that Frank Herbert was trying to sell. Like it's very clear what Frank Herbert is saying.
No, certainly. I think that's fine. Like as I said, I read the first one almost once a year. Like I probably missed a few years here and there, but generally speaking, I read that one a lot. Not so with the other ones. I'll probably get into the second one again at some point, just before they release the next movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the first one is definitely where it's at.
Yeah. I mean, the first one has a pretty compelling thesis statement all on its own, what with the whole it's very clear if you actually pay attention to the what is being said in the book. Like there's a lot of theme. Dune is a very thematically heavy book and series.
Yes, absolutely.
But one of the central themes is the danger of messiah figures and religious fanaticism. Like that is one of the core themes of the book, and like you see it very heavily embodied with Paul and his mother, and how they manipulate the Fremen.
And I think something that might not be super obvious to modern audiences, but and probably wasn't super obvious to audiences back in the 60s when the first book released, but at least more so, and certainly to people of then Frank Herbert's age more so. The title, not the name, but the title they call Paul by Mardi is a real world thing.
Oh, huh. Interesting.
And yeah, and as a matter of fact, there was and in its time fairly famous uprising in the British colonies called the Mardi Uprising. So and Dune is heavily featuring that. Like it's very much the Mahdi Uprising meets a hefty dose of Lawrence of Arabia, together with an international oil crisis.
Naturally, of course.
Yes.
I mean, the spice is very much a combination of like drugs and oil, basically.
Yeah, but like the drug part is really more of a story thing than a thematic thing, I believe. Like, yes, it's obviously a drug in the story, but thematically, it's oil. It's what makes transportation go.
Go burr, yes. But yeah, like that's one of the other themes. Like he who controls the spice controls the world, basically. And it's like very much a commentary on the hoarding of resources in order to gain or maintain power. Which is, you know, there's a lot about power in Dune.
Yeah, it's very focused on the power people have over not only other people but also their environment, and in turn the power the environment has over people, and how these two intersect. Like that's kind of why the Fremen work the way they do, because Herbert, in my opinion, Herbert was very concerned with these interactions between people and their environment, and the Fremen are the best at interacting with the specific environment of Dune.
Yes.
Or Arrakis, as it's actually called, but everyone calls it Dune, even in universe.
Good old
Dune. And that's very much another one of the prevailing themes, is this interaction of environment and people, which is very interesting because like environmentalism was not that big in the 60s compared to today.
Yeah, no, I think it was just starting to take off in the 60s along with a lot of other rights movements.
Yeah. So it's very interesting to see someone so obviously concerned with environmentalism to this level.
Yeah. exactly. But yeah, there's a lot of other stuff too in Dune that is just so like with regard to the power and the environment. Another thing to keep in mind is like you are never as in control as you think you are. You can be blindsided by just about anything, no matter how much you prepare for things, and that's
Yeah, in the end, that's what makes Paul powerful in the narrative because he can't be surprised by the end.
Yes,
because he's basically, if not omnipresent, at least omnipotent. Like he sees everything.
yep. And there's just the whole thing of Paul becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. I always mispronounce that. I'm sure. Uh, is that it blindsides a lot of people, but he himself becomes blinded by his own, growing fanaticism and his own glory and power, and he starts to lose sight of all of the devastation his crusade will cause, basically.
That's yeah. Although I will say I will get a little bit into the later books here. That's not quite like that's how it comes out in the first books, but that's not quite how Herbert plays it.
Mm.
Because how he plays it, by the second book, Paul basically becomes a secondary character, and his son becomes more or less the main character.
I'm shocked.
Shocked. That's the one who turns into a sandworm later, literally.
So that's why it's called Children of Dune.
Surprising, isn't it? No, and the narrative. I'm not going to call it a twist because we have poisoned that word in modern media dialogue. But the narrative take on that is that Paul doesn't become blind to it, because the narrative after the first book is very interested in keeping Paul as the good guy. Like Paul is to his son Leto, unfortunately same name, what Leto the first was to Paul, like the good father figure. And basically how it shakes out is Paul saw all the possibilities, like went full Doctor Strange, 792 options, and took the one with the least death. Unfortunately, the one with the least death meant intergalactic holy war. Like that's the best path he could take.
Yeah.
And yeah, at that point, as I said, it kind of breaks down in the second and third book because of stuff like that. Like the narrative is very interested in keeping Paul centered as generally a decent guy who was kind of dealt a bad hand, and that leads to these things.
Yeah.
Although the choice of
people don't seem to understand that it sucks to be Paul.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Paul is a hero in the sense that he's the main character of a book we're reading, and he's a heroic figure in the world in the sense that he fights a war and makes grand impact on the universe as it is. But Paul is just basically at the whim of his own power, both political power and literal psychic power.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think like that's where maybe themes and stuff don't really matter that much anymore, and where it just becomes an interesting story because it has a very interesting take on the literary hero. Because to Paul, like the first book is basically 2 books. Like you can cut it in half pretty evenly, and they did for the movie, which we'll get to later. Like you can easily do that. Many things did that. Like the miniseries from the early 2000s did that too, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, and it makes a lot of sense, of course. Like that's obviously the turning point in the book. But basically, by the time that second thing starts, Paul is almost without agency. Like he has more agency than anyone else, but that is still very little agency because of the way things are interlocked. Like he knows if I do this one thing, this cascade of other things will follow, and he can't really do much about it except pick one and accept that that's how things will play out. And that's what makes him interesting, because to me it's a more interesting take on fate and being the chosen one than what you get in your basic fantasy novel.
Yeah. I mean, this one also, unlike a lot of fantasy novels, does a thing of, hey, people don't seem to understand the impact that they have on the world at large with their actions. Paul's the only one who actually does, or at least seems to. And, like, everyone else is just absolutely shocked, flabbergasted even, that their actions and the actions that they are brought about by their own actions have an impact.
Yeah, I think the only other ones who are close to, but not as much as Paul, but close to being aware of their actual impact on the universe are probably the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
Everyone else is kind of just playing capitalism for their own gain.
Capitalism with extra steps and also a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah, of course. Basically feudal capitalism, if you will.
Yes. I mean, isn't that just regular capitalism?
Well... no, but I think the Bene Gesserit are close to being aware of their own impact. Of course, they are also, as everyone, including Paul, blinded by their own power. But yeah, everyone else is not really, either isn't aware of their own power or their own limitations. And again, the intersection of these two things is essentially their downfall. But that's true for both the Emperor, the Harkonnen, basically everyone. Even Paul by the end.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot of thematic density here that gets iterated on and reiterated upon throughout just the first novel alone, really. There's a lot.
Yeah. When I bought my first own copy of Dune, to no longer mooch off my dad, I told him I've bought Dune, and he was like, "Why do you hate yourself?" And we both love this book. It's just so dense. Like, you can really... And the thing is, not only the story is dense, like there's appendices, and those are also very dense, and I would argue at least two of them are very important to actually understand the story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the thing, like, there's a lot of... It's all there in the manual. Just check out the giant, thick-ass manual. What could possibly go wrong?
And the funny thing is, like, this is not like those modern Tolkien editions. We have a ton of Tolkien material that was, like, found in a desk drawer, added to the book. Like, that was all in the first edition.
Yep.
Because Herbert knew, if I want people to understand this, I have to give them info on what the Bene Gesserit do, how the Missionaria Protectiva legend seeding thing works. I have to make them understand why the Fremen are essentially environmentalist extremists, and like, it's so fucked up that he had all this in his head. And I was like, oh, it doesn't really belong in the story, so I'll just snap it at the end as an appendix and hope people read it. And I promise you, most people don't.
Yeah, because who wants to sit through all that when they could just get through the pew-pew laser stuff?
Exactly.
And the political backstabbing bullshit.
Don't use lasers. Using a laser against a shield will cause a nuclear explosion.
Right. All the stab at knife stuff.
Yeah. Like, that's one of these things. Like, the whole use a shield because it protects you against projectiles, but blades can get through it, is so old. Like, that's much older than Herbert. But today, if you put that in anything, people will go, yeah, Dune.
I mean, there is something to be said for it being the thing that popularized it to the point where most everyone who uses it took inspiration from Dune.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, much like Tolkien didn't invent much of what is popular about Lord of the Rings, Herbert didn't invent much of what is popular about Dune, but he put it all together. And some people liked it and put some little nods to their work in it, and other people made Warhammer 40k, which is just Dune with space aliens.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing with Dune. Like, Dune is one of those big sci-fi things that doesn't have aliens in it, which is fascinating.
Nope. Like, it has all the other things. Later on, you get clones and distant relatives, of course, and mutations and stuff, but no aliens. It's all humans.
Again, really interesting thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's also one of the other things that kind of makes Dune stand out, is that the timeline of Dune is incredibly vast,
like,
and kind of stupid, but it makes sense. Like, in its own way, it makes sense. because Dune takes place in the year 10,000 something, but that is not 8,000 years from now.
Yeah.
Like that is 10,000 years since the first emperor took power, which is like that's about 8,000 years from now, maybe. I'm not entirely
I believe
sure.
it's set.
I'm sure it's somewhere in the book, but I don't know.
I believe it's set in the 210th century AD, effectively.
Yeah, something like that. Like it's insanely far in the future, and that's what allows Herbert to do stuff like, yes, there are only humans, but they are everywhere, because way before anything in Dune became even remotely important, humans scattered around the universe. And I mean, that's one of the big concepts people think of when they think of Dune, is that there are no AIs, no computers, no anything.
That is also very fascinating in of itself.
Because they were outlawed. We had them when we scattered all around the galaxy 10,000 plus years ago.
But then they did a Skynet.
The Battlerian Jihad took place, and they were all destroyed and outlawed. And that's another thing. Like, Herbert specifically calls this outlawing and destroying of artificial intelligences the Butlerian Jihad. Like, even 10,000 years ago, everything was very Arab influenced, because Herbert took a shining to this culture and just put it in his book.
And some might call that homage, some might call that appropriation. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that, but
yeah, I think it's very hard to go appropriation when, like,
it's not portrayed as
the Fremen culture is not really an Arab culture anymore. Like, it uses Arab terms and language, but the way they work is not.
There's some aesthetic maybe similarities, but that's as far as it goes.
But even those you can probably hand wave away as just utilitarianism for people who live in a
yeah, most desert dwellers have similar, styles in their clothing.
Yeah. And I mean, they are related to Muslims because there's some Sunnite in there, but they are Zen Sunnite Buddhists, if anything. Like, that's the thing. Our religions don't exist anymore. There's the Orange Catholic Bible, which somehow came out of Christianity and no one knows how. And there's the Zen Sunni mysticism Buddhists, who are like kind of Buddhists, but also kind of Muslims. Like, it's not. I don't know. I struggle with calling it cultural appropriation just because it's very deliberately not.
Yeah, it's
the culture.
Very different.
Yeah. Again, like, that's more of a sci-fi thing. It takes what the culture is then when Herbert wrote it in the 60s and extrapolates. What happens if these seeds of culture remain intact for 10,000, 100,000, 200,000 years? Where do we go with that? So yeah, I don't know. I think it's. Of course, I'm not the one to decide that. I'm a white guy from Germany.
Yeah. I'm a white guy from America. I don't really have much ground to stand on.
But to me, like, when other things did, this one never read particularly appropriative to me. But again, I'm not the one to decide that, and I would defer to anyone who says it is, within reason.
Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said about drawing a lot of inspiration from the Middle East and the political situation. What with, there are definitely a lot of inspiration of drawn from those countries and the people therein for the
certainly
for the Fremen, as well as just they are the only place in the world or in the universe rather that controls this incredibly important transportation resource. It's not subtle. Yeah. I would never accuse Frank Herbert of being subtle.
Not at all. Still too subtle for some, but I can't help those people. But no, it's not subtle at all.
No one can help those people.
Frankly, I don't think Herbert intended to be particularly subtle. Like, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, from what I've heard, he straight up made the sequels to Dune because people didn't understand the point of the first book. Which,
maybe I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't
be shocked. Like, there's a lot to be said for, like, people missing the point of the series.
Yeah,
sometimes over.
people miss the point of everything. So
Media
certainly
literacy
some
is
miss the
dead,
point
something,
of Dune.
something.
Yeah, probably has been for 100 years. No, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that were true. I don't know. I have not really looked into the history of the writing of Dune.
I don't know 100% for sure if it's true, but that is what I have
Yeah.
heard down the grapevine.
Oh, again, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Uh,
It would be unsurprising, completely and utterly, if it were the case. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for just the theming and the framing of it, but the characters also are something else.
yeah, absolutely. I think Herbert again very deliberately decided to not really make his characters people. Like no one talks like a normal person in Dune.
Yeah,
It's
that's
all
what.
it's all very and again also no one thinks like a normal person in Dune. And some of that is justified with the Bene Gesserit training and stuff, but just generally it's all very dramatized. It's not really you're not supposed to really identify with anyone. You're more supposed to just take it in like you're in a theater or looking at a stage and seeing like Shakespeare or something.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that is something that all the movies actually did pretty well, or
They made it
or
seem like
they
they were talking
took a
like
very
upper crust type
yeah
folks. Very much like there's like a sense of formality in the Villeneuve films.
yeah. And that's another thing. Like people often kind of miss, or at least I see people missing a lot, is that the politics in Dune, um, they stand on formality. Like without formality, the entire politics arc of the story doesn't work. Because I often see people going like, why did the Emperor even give the Atreides Arrakis if he doesn't like them? And well, that's the point. He gives them so nobody likes them because nobody likes whoever controls Arrakis
Yep.
and stuff like that. And also this weird thing of people often misunderstand why the Emperor needed the Atreides dead, and oh, well, it's because he doesn't like them and they grew popular in the Landsrat, and that's no, not really. The point why the Atreides are important is because Duncan, Idaho is almost as good as the Sardaukar, like the best military unit in the world, and if the Atreides can make more of those, that's bad for the Emperor because the military is what keeps him in power.
Yep.
And,
There's a
and
lot of factors that go into the Emperor
yeah,
deciding to bump off the Atreides. It's not just
and I
he
think
was jealous of the popularity.
yeah, no, and I think the way people misunderstand those speaks to how important formality is to the Dune universe because of course those are the reasons people say in the universe for why things happen because you can't say outright that everyone is always afraid of the Emperor because he has the best military.
No, you can't say the
That's not
quiet
how it
part out loud.
works. Exactly. And I think that's why it's so important in Dune to read between the lines and then read between those lines. Like you need to understand the theming of what Herbert wants to tell you with his story, but you also need to look beyond that into how the story actually works, like on a fundamental level, how the gears turn. And like the entire ending of the first book with Paul becoming emperor only works because of formality and everyone thinking they are playing the system until the system is playing them, with the exception of Paul, who is actually able to play the system because he can see the future.
I get to the future. Sorry, obligatory joke.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, no, like there's a lot to be said for that, as well as just. I think Dune really captures how depraved and fucked up like this kind of situation would make at least some of the new nobility of this era. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
the
And
Harkonnens are monsters. I think Herbert
no,
went a
absolutely. And
bit over the
that's
top with some of it, but like not by too much.
well, David Lynch really went over the top when he introduced the cat and mouse milking machines. But
That's just David Lynch, though.
Yeah, but that's just David Lynch fetish, so I don't care. No, no, I think that's what really makes the characters work. That in a way they are almost cartoonish, especially the evil guys, like especially the Harkonnen and to an extent the Emperor. In a way they are almost cartoonish, but because the world is drawn the way it is, with everyone standing on formality to this extent, and this whole uh, feudal hierarchy being as important and as apparently untouchable as it is, because even God himself, Paul, can't really touch it. He can only put himself at the top. Um, that's what makes these cartoonish characters work, because frankly, within their own realm, the Harkonnen can act like that and nothing will happen.
Yep, because they have power, and that power is unassailable. Yeah.
And once they are backed by the Emperor, they just have more power. And that's what makes it work. And at the same time, that's what makes Leto, Paul's father Leto, work, because he's an idealist in a world that isn't really geared towards idealists.
Mm-hmm. And there's something we said about how the book handles the idea that power begets power, and so on and so forth along those lines. And
yeah, and I think even though I just said he's an idealist, the important thing is, yes, he's an idealist, but he's not necessarily a good person. Like, he also has spies and assassins, and he uses them with great skill.
The thing is, he's a better person than most of the noble houses, but that's like, that bar is in hell.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Leto Atreides is a decent person by the standards of the nobility of the empire and whatnot, but like,
yeah,
no, you were asking,
and I mean,
you were comparing that to a negative mean.
Yeah, the same goes for Paul. He's a good person, depending on the circumstances.
Yes,
like
he still ultimately gets he still ultimately becomes, the messiah of a massive religious movement that causes the deaths of billions.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does it knowingly. Like, if there's one thing you can maybe say for other people is they don't know, but he knows. Like, that's specifically his thing.
He knows all, and that is his burden and curse.
Yep.
Sucks to be him. But, yes, I do also find there are just some plain old silly elements in Dune. Like, we talked about the Harkonnens a little bit, but like there's a lot with the Harkonnens.
No, certainly.
They're just a lot as characters in general.
Again, Frank Herbert is not a subtle man, or was not a subtle man by any means, and so he has them be all the 7 deadly sins in one.
They are quite depraved, yes. But yeah, there's that. Then there's, of course, the inherent silliness of a toddler winding up being the one who kills Baron Harkonnen, which is hilarious. Yeah.
Like, that comes back in the later books to some shit, I will tell you.
Oh, please do tell.
Like, it gets insane. So Alia, Paul's sister, grows up to be like basically his advisor and the caretaker of the children of Leto and Ganima. Because Paul isn't doing it, because he's busy with Emperor stuff, and he doesn't want Irulan, the princess, to do it, and Chani can't really, because she's not really his wife, and so she has limited access to the children. So basically, Paul's sister becomes their caretaker, but she goes fucking insane, because as she grows older, this is so stupid, as she grows older, the spirit, basically, of the Baron Harkonnen overtakes her.
Oh, is this some, like, genetic memory bullshit?
Yeah, because, as you might remember, through their mother, the Atreides kids are Harkonnen. Like, Paul's mother is the daughter of the Baron.
There's something to be said about the nature versus nurture shit in this, but let's not. For now.
No, but because Alia is basically almost as omnipotent as Paul, but not quite. She has access to her past lives, and one of those is the Baron, and he overtakes her, and she goes insane.
Yep, that tracks.
But that's also fine because later on, a clone of Duncan Idaho, who has been dead for like centuries at that point, gets together with her, and they have. I don't know if they live happily ever after again. I haven't read that far. It becomes kind of stupid.
I'd heard that Duncan Idaho gets
later on.
I'd heard that Duncan Idaho gets cloned multiple points, but
yeah, like I think the final one's like the 7th one or something. Like there's a lot of Duncan Idahos going on later on.
That is so fucking funny.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole nother faction we don't know yet, and what they do is they clone. They have clones.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Something like Gola or something like that.
Yeah, the clones are Gola, which is related to the word golem, because they are like not real people but made people. And the faction making them is the Bennett Lilacs, is what they are called. So the Brotherhood of something, I don't know.
Sounds funky.
Yeah, like it again, it gets insane.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I say. Dune? Crazy? No.
More likely than you think. I mean, again, Leto the Second becomes not a sandworm, but the sandworm. I think I might misremember. I don't want to say anything wrong, but I think he becomes basically the only sandworm. So all the spice literally goes through him.
Oh my god.
And like it's insane. It gets completely fucking unhinged.
I mean, the first book is barely hinged to begin with.
Yeah, now you know why I never reached book 4.
yeah, no, I get it. Like, what the fuck?
And that is also like 10,000 years after the first book, so no one from then is even still alive. But of course, there are clones.
Well, yeah, no shit. I would be shocked if anyone was still alive at that point.
Yeah.
Like, there'd have to be some weird immortality bullshit going on, and the setting is way too grounded for that.
If you make yourself a sandworm, apparently you become immortal. But like, that's the thing. The first one really is very, very grounded, and it just goes completely off the rails. Like, it's almost like I almost want to see someone try and make movies of the whole 6 books, just because it would completely fall apart, and it would be super interesting to see.
I believe Villeneuve is only planning to adapt up through Messiah.
Yeah, I kind of thought they shouldn't have. Like, I'm looking forward to it because I love Dune, but I would have been good with just 2 movies.
No, I would have been good with 2 movies too, but I think he wants to just make a nice even trilogy.
Yeah, probably.
Also, I would not be shocked if the studio was like, hey, could you just bump out one more? The first one was really successful, and so was the second one, so just...
This one made a lot of money, and there's at least 2 vaguely popular books left.
Yep.
So do that.
I don't think they're going to adapt Children of Dune. I think they're going to stop at Messiah, or at least Villeneuve is. Like...
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. The thing is, at this point, they can't really do Messiah as is, because they have changed a lot.
Yes, we'll get to that in a bit. But
yeah. So I think what would be most likely is some amalgamation of the 2, plus some original writing and pulling things back together, and then just calling it quits. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, it would make sense. But there is also just... Yeah, no. I've heard Dune gets wild, and I am not shocked by the books getting completely unhinged off the fucking rails at that point.
Yeah, no, like, I'm sure there are people who love it, there are people who love everything, but, like, to me, it became completely unreadable by book 4. Like, it was just like, what the fuck is even going on here?
As it turns out, there is a point of no return for insanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes.
But, pulling it all back together, the first one is pretty grounded, actually. Like, the first one is really concerned with ideas of basically very basic human emotion and coexistence, and yeah.
Yeah, it's dense thematically and can be a dry read at times, but it's still very coherent and cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you can get the point pretty easily from the first book if you have any degree of media literacy whatsoever.
Yes, I would agree. Like most people, I mean, most people will probably never read Dune, but most people who read Dune will read the first one and leave it at that, and that's fine. Like
that's what I did.
All of Dune, all of Dune that you need to read is the first book. If you're really, really into it, try the second one and then just go as you please. Like if you want, do the third one, and if you go on, God be with you.
God help you mean?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, at some point, I'm gonna try again too and see if I can't make it further that time. But it's a lot.
Godspeed, Lore. Godspeed.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a very interesting series, both from a perspective of influence and also from the perspective of, oh hey, this is an interesting thematically dense sci-fi book. Nothing. It's kind of paved the path for that kind of thing, because most sci-fi novels beforehand, outside of like maybe Asimov, were like much more concerned with. Wait, no, was Heinlein also putting out books at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Those were contemporary.
So those three authors are kind of like the ones who like started putting out like really thematically dense sci-fi. Before that was much more pulpy.
That was like John Carter shit.
Yeah, much more pulpy.
Like there was a tradition in both sci-fi and fantasy for a long time. Like that was gone by the time Herbert published, but for a long time, that essentially you always had to have a main character who was like from the real world.
Oh god, all of them were isekais. Oh no.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was absolutely a thing. Like there was, I don't remember the name, but there was a super like popular fantasy serial back then. That was like about a World War II soldier who got pulled into Viking times or something like that.
Man, that sounds like some wild shit.
I read a book about the history of D&D, and he had some X courses to like just general fantasy writing history, and apparently it was just a common convention at the time to have a main character, like essentially an isekai protagonist, who was pulled into that world and then obviously was the best at it. Which is a problem with Dune that shouldn't be omitted. Like, of course, it's very white saviory.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You can really only do so much discussion about that without mentioning it, and like there's no defending it. Like,
some might say that Dune is kind of a deconstruction of the white savior. I don't know how well that argument holds up necessarily, but it's.
I mean, I'm fine with saying it deconstructs it, but it still very much uses it. Like,
absolutely,
to a very, very large degree. So yeah, I think it's very fair to say that Dune is white saviorism. I would say it is a little more nuanced than many white savior narratives, but I absolutely would be comfortable saying that that's an issue the series has, especially the first book. Like, it becomes a bit better after that because it just
leans more into
already
the
happened by that point. Yeah. It also just already happened by that point. Like, okay, fine. Like,
so now what?
Really change that. Yeah. But no, like, that's definitely, like, the fact is that the Greek boy comes to the desert and is the best desert man.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. The Atreides are specifically Greek, technically. I mean, that probably doesn't mean anything.
They're what, the House of Agamemnon or some shit?
Yeah, exactly. The Atreides are and that's canonically true in Dune.
Yes.
Like, Frank Herbert didn't just take that name. Like, that's canonically true. They are the House of Agamemnon. Just 100,000 years in the future, 200,000.
It's like what? I know, like, the Greek myths take place like 3,000 years past from where we are, and this is like 20-odd thousand years after the present. Yeah. So yeah, like almost 25,000 years later.
Yeah, like it's
ridiculous.
It's one of these weird sci-fi things.
How can you trace your lineage that far back? Jesus.
Who knows? But apparently the Atreides can.
Insane. Absolutely insane. But yeah, lots of craziness in Dune. And
Absolutely.
but we should also discuss the adaptation of Dune.
Yeah,
The
I was
most
gonna say we haven't even started on the adaptations yet.
Well, we're only going to discuss the Villeneuve films because there's a
Yeah.
lot that has been said about previous adaptations, and we don't
Yeah,
want to
I
go stepping
mean,
on those toes.
just a quick rundown. Of course, there's a David Lynch film that is good if you like the books and terrible in every other case. One adaptation I want to shout out specifically is the board game. Um, I think currently published by Fantasy Flight Games, though it's much older. It's like from the 70s or 80s. Uh, because the fun thing is, if you know the books well, you don't really need to read the rules for the game. And if you don't know the books, the game will spoil the books for you just because of the factions work like they work. Like, it's a very good piece of narrative game design. That's why I want to shout it out. Real quick, if people are interested, on Matt Koval's YouTube channel, they played it a few times. It's really cool. Just wanted to shout that one out because it rarely happens that a board game adaptation is at all noteworthy, but this one is.
I've also heard there are some video game adaptations of Dune.
Oh yeah, of course. The Dune 2 is the granddaddy of all real-time strategy games.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one.
Basically, it's what Westwood made before they made Command and Conquer, and it is the blueprint for Command and Conquer. So
I'm not shocked.
no, definitely an important video game. There are more, but I think that is the one that bears
That's the
mentioning.
most
just
iconic
because
one
it's
from what I've heard.
important, yeah. Yeah, no, and it's also just important in video game history. Like, apart from being a Dune thing, it's just an important game. Yeah, but of course, the really interesting adaptation to us is the most recent one.
Yep. So the thing with Dune Part 1 is that it is kind of incomplete by its very nature of just adapting
Yes.
the first half of the book. It also
Yeah, that was a very common refrain when it came out of people saying, well, I can tell you if I liked this once I saw the second one.
Yeah. Another thing to keep in mind is, like, this one didn't tweak nearly as much as the second one did.
Yeah, no, this one was very close.
Very
At least
faithful.
reasonably close, yeah.
We'll get to the second one in a sec, but
Yeah.
they did tweak some things, like some character appearances are a bit different.
Yeah.
There's a few context changes to, like, things here and there. A few minor characterization changes, like Raubon being a bit more of a
adapted.
dumbass.
They didn't use the book as a script. They adapted, and you have to. Largely successful, I would say. A few things that I'm not gonna say I didn't like, but that maybe could have been a bit better. Like, they basically erased Thufir Hawat.
He does show up in the first.
I mean,
he is in the first one. He
appears, but he has a very, very tiny role, and he's very important in the book. So that's kind of a.
That's unfortunate.
Oh well, it is unfortunate, but it's also like it's not.
They needed to cut the book. The movies are already fucking long as is.
Yeah, you can't adapt a book like Dune and not cut things, so it makes sense they cut that because again, explaining Mentar's probably pretty hard in a reasonable production. Because then you have to explain why there are no computers, and then you have to explain basically everything in the backstory, and that can't really be done in a feasible manner. So
without a massive fucking exposition dump, basically, yes.
I really like the character in the book, so I'm kind of I was a little bit miffed that he wasn't as important, but I understand.
Yeah, like they did change a lot of other characterization things as well, like. They do make some characters actively dumber or smarter just by, having to change some stuff around as a consequence.
Yeah. Honestly, having seen both movies at this point, I feel like the first one was kind of it's kind of only there to get you used to the look and like to the production design, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Like to make you understand how this world is supposed to look and feel. And that's why they in places went pretty simplistic with how they portrayed emotion and relationships and stuff, because it was really just set up for the actual movie.
Yeah, the second one definitely feels much more fully realized as its own thing.
Yeah, I think the second one also feels much more like the thing Denis Villeneuve wanted to make. Like it is like Denis Villeneuve is a great director and has a great eye for images. Like the first movie
Oh yeah.
looks amazing, but the second one is like it has frames that are so good. I like honestly, I watching the second one, I felt that was the one he wanted to make, and well, you have to go through the first one. And he brought all his craft and skill to the first one, but the second one it just it's fire. Like it's he
The f-
really put it all in there.
the thing with the first one is the first one has really great like production, performances, uh, soundtrack, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't have the like all the narrative shit that goes into the second one.
Yeah.
Like it's just substantially different.
No,
But
absolutely. And again, the second one changed a lot more, which we'll get into, and I think that kind of speaks for my theory that Denis Villeneuve really like he had an idea for what to do with the second half. But you can't make only the second half. So he got a real good people together, made a really good first movie to be sure to get the second one because
and then
kind
he
kind of like kind of like Chris Nolan with the Batman movies. Like he did Batman Begins, but he really wanted to make The Dark Knight,
yes.
obviously. And yeah.
And you can't make the one without making the other.
Oh, exactly. Like you need them both. And that's why I kind of think the third one is going to be fine, but it's probably not going to be as good as the second one because
Yeah.
again, if you ask me, what Villeneuve wanted to tell you was this story of Dune Part 2.
Yes. But yeah, most of the things that are changed in the adaptation of the first one are just like little things to kind of trim down the book into a movie-sized package because the book is long and dense.
Yeah, like they cut out a scene. Like in the book, that's a super important scene because it shows you how Paul works as a diplomat,
Yeah.
like the banquet scene.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's not in the movie at all.
Yeah.
And it is in the TV miniseries from the 2000s, but like it doesn't. You don't need it in this movie. It's not missing.
If I'm being honest,
Because
I suspect there is no way to fully faithfully adapt Dune just because of how much.
no, absolutely not. Like that's another thing. Like a very quick throwback to the David Lynch movie. There's always the story of what's his face? God damn it, I'm stupid. The guy they got, like the guy they wanted to do it before David Lynch did it. Anyway, like there's a documentation about his Dune movie, and people are like, "Oh, I want to see that." But what people need to understand is that movie doesn't exist and can't exist because that vision was so out of all bounds. It's not feasible
Yeah.
because you can't adapt Dune as is. You need to actually adapt. You need to cut. You need to trim. You need to find the core you want to work on.
Yeah, you need to adapt to the medium and adapt to the vision that you have
Yeah,
because yeah, there's just a lot of density to it.
yeah. Honestly, I think one of the weirdest, and I'm not even against this change. It's just one of the weirder changes in the first movie, and I have suspicions why it was made, but I'm not gonna voice them. Is that they make Heinz female? Like that doesn't do anything. It's just the same character, but now a woman. Kind of weird, but okay, sure.
They want to add some girl
Like,
bossy elements to it, I imagine.
yeah, exactly. Like I'm not even against it, but it kind of feels like someone in corporate was like, "Dude, we only have one woman in this movie that can't really work. We need another one." They were like, "Yeah, sure. Why not? Heinz can absolutely be a woman. Doesn't really matter."
Yeah, honestly, it's not a change that affects a lot.
No, that's the thing. Like they just made Heinz a woman. It doesn't do anything to the character in either direction. It doesn't make him worse. It doesn't make him better. It just makes Heinz a woman.
Yeah.
But it's probably one of the more overt changes in the first one that isn't cutting something for time or for brevity.
Yep. But yeah, it's a reasonable change to make if we're being honest. It's not like
No, absolutely.
something that cataclysmically affects
Yeah.
the plots.
No, like I said, I'm not at all against it. It's just when I watched it, and I didn't know, like I didn't watch trailers for the movie because I was gonna see it anyway. And when I saw it, I was like, okay,
Sure,
I
why
understand
not?
why you did it, but you could have been less obvious about it.
Yep. Look, they want to gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss their way
Absolutely.
into that crowd.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of what, we'll get to all the girl bossy shit.
Yeah.
God. Yeah. They do expand on some things here and there, like the Harkonnen invasion of Arrakis is expanded upon. It's mostly off screen in the book. And they do go into a little bit more detail about why the Atreides position on Arrakis is pretty precarious, actually, which does kind of help sell that angle to the political situation.
I think something that works in the movie that wouldn't even necessarily work in the books, but works in the movie is that the movie is the timeline is very short between the Atreides arriving on Arrakis and basically them being replaced again by the Harkonnen.
Yes.
And I think that works really well with the whole sabotage angle and the Harkonnen never really left. Like they kept their fangs in Arrakis all the time. And like the book is kind of unclear on the timeline, and there's the banquet scene and the evening ball stuff, and you never really know how long the Atreides have actually been on Arrakis. And that I think that works pretty well in the movie, that the movie is pretty fast paced.
Yeah. And that carries over into the second one too. The second one is like on a much compressed timeline, which has a knock-on effect on a lot of changes.
Almost physically exhausting.
There's a lot of stuff in the second one. And we might as well get into the changes made in the second one as well.
Yeah, sure.
Like, the biggest change, the two biggest changes, rather, are the changes to Alia's presence being, just a fetus for the entire movie rather than being a toddler for the climax.
She's essentially not there, which, again, will have huge knock-on effects on the next movie. And
it's not as much as the other big change, though, which is...
Well, of course. And I think one more quick thing to earlier. I think that is one of the effects they have because they put the timeline on such a... Like, they put a pacing to such a high tempo. Like,
I do get why
they needed things to happen fast, and they didn't have time for Alia to be born.
I get why, though, because, like, from a pragmatic standpoint, like... It'd be very difficult to do all the stuff with toddler Leah without, making it look fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's also just the thing of, again, explaining things. Like, in the books, you can absolutely devote time to explaining that the Fremen can basically live in peace in the southern hemisphere of Arrakis, because they pay off the spacing guild and all that. You can't really put that in a movie, because it's really, like, it's just a lot of information you need to convey somehow. And you can just cut that out, and then you don't have time for Alia to be born. You also don't have time for Paul's first kid to be born. So
speaking of which, they changed a lot about Paul's relationship with Chani. And honestly, I do think that is a change for the better, because Chani in the book is very much a satellite character to Paul.
Yeah, that's the thing. In the book, she's very much a satellite character, and the book is about Paul. And this second movie is, to me, very clearly about Chani and her relationship.
Yeah, she is basically the deuteragonist of the...
God. Yeah.
She's basically the deuteragonist to Paul. I'd say her and Jessica kind of share that role, because they have their own character arcs, and...
Yeah, but Jessica's is basically taken from the book. Like, Jessica has pretty much the same in the book.
It's a much more flagrant in the corruption arc aspect of it, though.
That's the thing. Like, that's a change to the relationship between Paul and Jessica from the book.
Yeah.
Into the movie, that Jessica is much more overtly against... Like, she acts maybe in Paul's best interest, but against his wishes. Mm-hmm. That is at least not as overt in the book. And in the book, you could say it's more the other way around, that Paul manipulates her into doing certain things. So that is one half of the change, and the other half of the change is, of course, his relationship to Chani. Although I will say, their relationship isn't really changed. Like, they are romantically in love, if you will. Yeah. And
the time scale of that relationship has changed, however, and that has a knock-on effect.
Yeah, not only the timescale, but also just
the depth.
Chani's position in it. Like, because in the book, she's very much Paul's woman, if you will.
She's much more devoted to him in the book. And
Yeah.
Part of that is, like, her film counterpart has a much more skeptical attitude towards the Messiah shit.
Exactly. The book basically, well, the book treats the emerging religion of Paul as a fact. And the movie is not content to do that. The movie questions that. The movie says, no, the old people believe in the religion. The young people don't give a shit. The young people need a soldier.
I think they position it as more of a regional thing, actually. Like, the harsher South is much more religiously devout than the less environmentally hostile North. Which if I recall correctly, a lot of real world religions, it's a case of, like, harsher environments tend to breed a lot more fanaticism, a lot more devotion.
Yes, that's true. Though I don't know. To me, it felt more like a generational thing.
It did
just
feel like
because it's conveyed through the relationship between Chani and Stilgar.
Yeah,
and they are from the same.
Well, no, Stilgar's from the south. Thing. Yeah.
Well, Chani isn't from the south because she's Kain's daughter, but she essentially was raised by Stilgar. So yeah, to me it came off more as a generational thing, but I will not deny that there's a regional factor to it. But anyway, like that is the big change the movie makes to the book. Like in the book, all the Fremen believe in Paul because the religion of Paul Muad'Dib is treated as fact. And in the movie, it is very much treated as religion. You believe in it or you don't.
Yep.
And that changes their dynamic.
Not to mention, like, the time scale of the film means that the relationship doesn't have time to grow into something a lot more, devoted. So
of course, in the book, it's basically. So yeah, again, just to compare, in the end, what happens in both is Paul gets married to the daughter of the emperor and becomes the emperor.
Empress, yeah. Emperor,
because
she becomes the empress.
Because again, formality. He can't become the emperor by killing the emperor. You become the emperor by inheriting the title. How do you inherit it? You need to marry into the family. But in the book, it is very clear that marriage is entirely meaningless to both of them. They don't know each other. They don't care about each other. She needs to do it to prevent her family dying. He needs to do it to, and Paul and Chani are basically, in the book, Paul and Chani are basically married by that point. Like, by all Fremen customs, they are husband and wife, if you want to call it that. And they had a kid together, again, that is not in the movie, but they had a child which was killed when the Harkonnen raided the siege. And that also changes their relationship, because when that kid dies, they go on and question their relationship, and can we do this to ourselves and to each other? Is it fair to the other person? Because both of us carry this burden of this war. And the movie does not bother with that at all, because it's much more interested in how does Chani relate to Paul's messiahhood, if you will.
Yeah. And it's much more devoted to questioning the whole thing of the Messiah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the movie does treat the religion as that, as belief, and as not necessarily productive belief.
There are a lot of other minor changes, but I do feel like the characterization of Chani being changed is a net positive, because it
absolutely
gives the character
agree.
a lot more depth, and it allows for a lot more thematic weight to be put on her, and thus explore themes better.
Yeah, I would say it allows her to explore entirely new themes that weren't in the book, because again, I believe this is what Denis Villeneuve wanted to make.
Yeah.
Like, Denis Villeneuve was much more interested in this question of questioning the religion than Frank Herbert was. Frank Herbert was more interested in how do people use religion as a blunt instrument. And Denis Villeneuve is much more interested in how do people inside of a culture relate to questioning the ideals of their culture.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, a more timely question. Like, that is very much a movie you would make today. You wouldn't make a movie where Chani is a devoted follower like everyone else today.
Yeah. There's a lot of other minor things that get changed as well. Like in the first one, like Phaedra doesn't appear until the second movie. Same with Princess Irulan.
Yeah, and the relationship between like Jessica and the other Fremen nuns is kind of different, but that doesn't put a huge impact on the story.
One change I do appreciate is that they don't really bring up the Baron being, a deviant all that much.
Yeah, it's just...
It would be a very unnecessary addition, because he's already a depraved motherfucker.
Yeah, I think they do it pretty well. Like, they hint enough that if you've read the book, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't read the book, you still get, like, he's a weird fucko, but he's just weird, yeah.
Okay, he's a depraved motherfucker, but, like, you get enough of that from the film that you don't need the extra bits that the book put in.
You don't need him to cannibalize children he fucked before.
Yeah. Speaking of the Baron, in the film, it is Paul who kills him rather than Aaliyah, because that would look fucking ridiculous if they had a toddler murdering the Baron.
They did it twice before in 2 other movies. No, but yeah.
Actually,
huge effects on the future.
The thing is, this isn't the first adaptation of Dune to actually have Paul be the one to kill the Baron. There was actually I found this out because of TV tropes. It is very funny. So basically, there is an erotic adventure game based off of Dune 2, the video game, that has one of the options for possible endings.
They couldn't have a child in that, yeah.
One of the options for the ending allows Paul to kill the Baron.
That's wonderful.
That's hilarious to me. Just so fucking funny.
Yeah, it really is.
I also know the name of the game, but I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to get demonetized. I don't want to take any chances.
No, it's fine.
If you know, you know.
No, that's another big story change, and I think that's the one that makes me curious about what they're gonna do with the next movie, because there's just one entire plot line they can't do now.
Yep. Or if they can do it, they're going to have to find a way to finagle how to do it. Yeah.
I mean, they still can, because she's still technically just as much of a Harkonnen as before. They just don't have the direct connection, because the Baron doesn't know she exists when he dies.
There's also other elements that, like, they distill quite a bit about the use of atomics.
Yeah, that's something but in none of the adaptations they really explain it well. That
it's like, kind of a lot to explain, if I'm being honest.
Like, this is, of course, but like, this is a Cold War book, and that's it. Like, you're not supposed to use your atomics.
Yeah,
you're supposed to have them, the family atomics.
Yeah, but
no one ever really puts it out there how fucked up it is that they do use them.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. The thing is, like, Paul uses a kind of a loophole in the whole code about the atomics to deploy them, because he's not deploying them against a person. He's
exactly. He's destroying a bomb. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can probably handwave, like, in the future they probably have some way to deal with Fallout and all that shit. So, sure, fine, why not?
But yeah, I do like how they tweaked the use of atomics a little bit, in that Paul threatens to just fucking nuke all the sandworms, rather than,
that actually happens in the later books.
Oh yeah,
that happens in, I think, the second book. Again, it's not Paul then; it's later his son, later the second. But that basically becomes his leverage. He says, "Well, the worms make spice. If I just kill all the worms, there you go."
Yeah, like, the thing is, like, his blackmail threat in the books is like, I'm going to pour the water of life into this pre-spice thing that causes a chain reaction and all that shit. It's like, that's a bit much. But, so again, just trying to
you can't really set up the water of life. You can't really set up how that relates to the worms. So you just nuke the worms. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a distillation, but it makes sense. It's a way to simplify things that's without.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
people know what nukes do.
Exactly. Like, if you say we're gonna nuke the worms, you make them. Like, I'm not sure, but I think the movie never really explains that the worms make the spice. It just kind of lets it hang there that whenever there's spice, a worm comes.
They do explain. They do at least show that the worms are the source of the water of life.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think
it does have the spice aesthetic, so it is implied enough. I think.
Yeah, no, like it's you're supposed to know by the end that the worms make the spice. But yeah, no, that's another one of those adaptational changes that makes perfect sense. Like, do I want to explain why the water of life works the way it does? No, I don't. I just want to make people understand Paul wants to destroy the spice, so nuke it, sure.
Yeah. There's also the whole thing with whatchamacallit? They adapted out a few other characters here and there, like Count Fenring isn't...
Count Fenring is never in any of the adaptations.
He's only in, like, one scene in the book, so I get it. Like, one or two scenes. It's a good scene, but, like...
No, Count Fenring is much like Tom Bombadil. Entirely unimportant, but just super cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's technically a better fighter than Fate Rauta.
Yes, but at the same time, like, his wife is much more important to the plot.
Yeah. And
also, it's so tragic that they didn't adapt the Spacing Guild in all their campy glory.
Yeah, I think the Spacing Guild is really hard to adapt well.
Oh, no, absolutely.
They tried in the 1984 movie, and it doesn't really work. They tried in the...
I've seen clips of the Spacing Guild in the 84 movie. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah. The fucking vagina alien thing.
Yeah.
Then they tried again in the miniseries, and it also doesn't... Like,
it's so hard to adapt them.
You can't really adapt them. It's fine. Explain that you need them, and they need spice to make space travel work. Fine.
Yeah. But yeah, whatchamacallit? There's also, like, bits and pieces here and there of, like, characters switching around their importance. They do a lot more with Irulan in this movie than I think they did in the books. Because in the books, like, she's mostly just, like... Or at least in the first book, she's only, like, exposition who reads, like, certain passages, and then you get a little bit of her at the end. They do a lot more to, like, explain what she does and what her political position is here.
Yeah, I think if you get Florence Pugh, you kind of need to actually use her.
Yeah, because she's a good fucking actress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it makes sense. Like, the way this movie centers Chani, you kind of need a counterpart on the quote-unquote evil side. So it makes sense to have her machinations be more in the foreground and just...
Not to mention...
put her a bit more into the spotlight.
It does lead to this interesting bit where, towards the end, where everyone is bowing to Paul, and the only people who aren't are Irulan, Chani, and Jessica.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense why those three are the ones who aren't bowing.
Yep.
But it wouldn't have worked as a moment in the film if we didn't get any development for Irulan, if she was just there at the end, you know?
Hmm.
It would have just felt like kind of weird.
Like you can't omit her from the end, and to put her in the end, you have to set her up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that is harder to do than you might think. Like in the 1984 version, they had her. Quick circle back to the book. The book, each chapter starts with essentially a quote from the biography, in-universe biography Irulan wrote about Paul, or one of several. And in the 1984 movie, they actually have her read the first little quote, like with her face on screen and all, and then it fades into space. It's super weird. And it doesn't work to set her up at all because, like, okay, I know she exists, and because I've read the book, I know who that is. But if I haven't read the book, that's just...
She's just weird exposition, woman.
Yeah. And she doesn't appear again until the end. And it's like, okay, I guess. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Like, that's the issue with the 1984 movie. Like, someone on the production read the book, took out all the cool scenes, and made that into a movie. And that means there's no cohesive tissue at all.
Speaking of the 84 movie, even though they didn't get Sting back to play Fade Rauth, which would have been hilarious, Austin Butler does a pretty fucking good job.
Yeah, he's amazing. Like, they told him, you're a fucking animal, and he did it.
He went fucking ham.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, good for him. He put in a good performance.
No, certainly.
I don't think there were any weak
pretty
performances
much.
in the cast, honestly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Dave Bautista wasn't really given a lot, but that's in the nature of the part. The Beast Raban is just the Beast Raban. That's just what that part is.
He looks like he
So,
had a lot of fun.
yeah, like if I had to pick one and say that is the weakest performance, I would probably pick that. But that's not on Dave Bautista. That's not on the writing either. That's just on the part because that part doesn't have a lot of meat on it.
Yeah, it's very inconsequential, largely compared to
Yeah.
several of the other parts in the film.
I mean, I wouldn't even say it's just it's very in your face. Like Raban is what you see is what you get.
True.
In a way that basically no other character is.
I do like the little change that Gurney gets to be the one who kills him this time. Because, like,
Yeah,
it feels appropriate.
I would agree to that. Yeah,
And it also makes it...
and also, well, with Paul killing the Baron, they couldn't have Paul kill everyone. You know.
Yeah, he couldn't get a triple... They couldn't let him get a hat trick on the Harkonnens.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone had to get one of the others.
Yeah. Just to keep it all dramatic. No, I think the changes work really well. The big ones we talked about and the small ones are not inconsequential in the way that they don't mean anything, but just inconsequential in the way that they don't make the plot better or worse. They just make it different.
Yeah. And honestly, most of the changes are at least fitting or interesting. And usually they're pretty neat. I do like a lot of the aesthetic stuff in the movies, though. Like, Denis Villeneuve...
The arena sequence with
that's so good.
Fedra looks so good. Like, that's so awesome.
It is insane.
Yeah. And I wonder how it felt to make that, because, like, I'm sure the sets didn't look like that. They just that's all post-production.
I believe they filmed most of that just in black and white. That's how they did it. But they did bits where it's like when they're not directly in the light of the black sun, they're like just in full color, and like then you see that scene transition. It's like, holy shit, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Just
like,
really
as
impressive.
I said earlier, like Denis Villeneuve really has an eye for like big images and puts them all in the frame. Like, he's so good at constructing a frame that is interesting and good to look at. Like, yeah, everything that's supposed to be big looks huge. Everything that's supposed to be intimate looks tiny and comfortable and good. It's God, I could talk just about Denis Villeneuve's frames for hours.
It's hard not to. He's a very skilled filmmaker. Just like,
yeah, absolutely,
incredible stuff.
Absolutely. In the first movie, there's this shot at the beginning when the Bene Gesserit ship arrives on Caladan, where it's just like in profile the ship, the Reverend Mother, and Jessica, and it's such a good, just looks so good. And
then there's literally every single shot of the sandworms. You gotta love the respect Denis Villeneuve put into good old Shai Hulud.
Yeah. Though I will say, maybe I'm just old, but I will always prefer the lamprey mouth sandworms over these. Like, I like the triangle mouths thing.
I get it. At the same time, though, these ones look really fucking cool, nonetheless.
No, they look awesome, and the sandworm riding sequence is great.
Yeah. It's so.
But again, like if I take out my magnifying glass and find the tiny chips in the paint, that's one where I just like the original sandworm design from the original book. Like, that's just
completely fair, honestly. Like, completely.
Again, I saw the '84 movie, which has just that design when I was like 8. So, you know,
just very, very influential on your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having design preferences, honestly.
Yeah.
And still, like, some of the designs are just like wild. Like, you see all those weird mutations that the Harkonnens have about.
Yeah.
Like, these people are freaks. Good God.
Yeah, I saw someone complain, and I didn't really get that. I saw someone complain that the still suits, the Fremenware, basically look like paintball gear, but I
I
didn't.
like
I
this.
didn't
I
think
like the
so.
still suits. They look cool.
Yeah, like I didn't think they looked like paintball, like or I didn't think they looked bad at all, and I thought they looked fine. Like they looked like good utilitarian things you'd wear.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really didn't get that complaint at all.
It's a pretty dumb complaint, honestly.
Yeah. I,
Yeah. The Fremen are very interesting. I do like how they adapted them and their cultural aesthetics too. Like it's a nice blend of traditional and sci-fi.
yeah. I think the whole like it's very important to any Dune adaptation that the desert is its own character
Mm-hmm.
and but is also shaped by the people living in it, and I think they did that really well in this one.
They did about as well as any adaptation could, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard to characterize an environment without like straight up prose. If you don't have prose, it's very hard to do that. But I still think
Yeah.
they did a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, I think I'm confident in saying they probably did the best here just because they had the budget, the skill, and the tech to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like in 1984, they certainly had the skill and maybe the budget, but just not the tech. In the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, they did not have the budget, and the caves all look kind of like cardboard and styrofoam. uh, no, in this one, it all looked really, really good.
Yeah. It's just really good in general.
Yeah.
Like, there's something to be said for the final knife fight in the movie, too. Like, holy shit, it's so well choreographed and everything.
Yeah, and I think like I imagine, I don't know, I haven't made a movie before, but I imagine knife fights are hard to do because like a knife is tiny compared to what you usually use, which is a sword. And it's such a close thing, but they really pull it off. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really, really works.
I think the thing with sword fights is those are like, swords more than any other weapon are the easiest to choreograph with because you
Yeah,
have the
because
blade, you have and you can have like the parrying, and all sorts of different aspects of dueling with it.
yeah, it's just I mean a sword is just
It's a very
so
good
like a
dueling
sword
weapon.
telegraphs every move.
Yeah.
Check out Blade Song on Steam.
But like I would be remiss if I didn't say like I would very much like it if there were more like fights in film where it was like a spear fight or a knife fight or an axe fight or something like that. Just like
Yeah, I
switch
just
things
think
up.
I just think swords are so comparatively easy to choreograph. And of course, a sword is an inherently heroic image,
Yes. But there's a
just in
reason that
Western
heroes
culture.
preferred swords as a trope.
Yeah. I do wonder if Herbert specifically picked knives because like a knife or a dagger has some dark connotations with like assassinations and stuff.
Mm,
I do wonder, but I never really thought of that when reading Dune, so I wouldn't be surprised if you just picked them because it's more utilitarian to say, well, you want a small weapon you can stab someone slowly with.
yeah. I mean, also, there's just the aesthetics of, shanking a motherfucker.
Yeah, no, certainly. That's not to be
The
dismissed.
thing is, a knife is a very intimate weapon, too, so you can have all sorts of things going on with that, like,
Yeah,
including the backstabbing, too. You got a poetic element to it.
yeah. And you can leave a little kiss on the forehead as you stab them in the chest.
Oh, yeah, speaking of kissing, fucking sweet home Yeti Primer right there.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
they
Harkonnen.
they had to adapt Baron Harkonnen's weirdness somehow.
Yeah, yeah. I think they had to. It
Another
had to be
element
done.
of Fade Routha that gets across really well is just how much of a fucking wild shit he is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think all the characters are handled really well in this one, though. Like they do a good
yeah,
job of giving them like strong archetypes with nuance, which is like the I think the best way to handle grand epics like this. You know?
yeah. I think again, if I have to look really closely and find things to criticize, I'd probably say in the entire adaptation in both movies, Stilgar gets kind of.
I feel like he gets a little bit of decay in the second one. The first one, he has a good deal of nuance to him, I think.
Yeah, but no, it's just I think he just gets a lot less screen time than he does in the book. But again, it's a different story. Like because in the book, again, the religion is fact, and that means Stilgar is the high priest of what's going on. And here he's mostly just kind of a religious weirdo. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just if I have to pick things where I go, well, this stands out to me. I'd say Stilgar getting kind of the short end of the stick, adaptation wise, kind of sticks out a little bit.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I do appreciate the acting that goes into Stilgar, though, because Javier Bardem is one of the best actors on the fucking planet.
Treasure, absolutely, absolutely.
The man sells everything he does on his own screen.
Definitely. I mean, and it's not like this is like a character assassination of Stilgar or anything. It's just he's less important to this particular story than he is to the story in the book.
I do think, like, there isn't a single weak link in the cast, as I said earlier.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everyone is bringing their A game.
Yeah. Even Christopher Walken doesn't have much to do, but he is like...
Oh, but he's so good at it.
He's really good at it. Yeah, he's really good as the Emperor. Like, I believe this man is a man who has authority that he has lived with his entire life, and he is just trying his damnedest to lay down law to maintain that authority.
Exactly, and the moment it doesn't work anymore, he's completely out of his depth. It's like, what the fuck?
He's like fucking shattered inside, and is
my world just ended. Basically.
Exactly. That bit of just humiliation on his face as he's forced to bend the knee to Paul is just excellent.
Christopher Walken is basically a one-scene wonder in this one. Like he's
only like 2 or 3 scenes.
Short time. Yeah, but he's great.
Yeah. The thing with Christopher Walken is like he's never been a bad actor, but like.
But you have to give him the right roles.
You have to give him the right roles. He has been miscast more than once. But when he is put in the right role and when he is given a script that he can work with.
Yeah.
Just incredible stuff.
Absolutely.
And let us not be said that we are going to neglect anyone else in the cast, because Rebecca Ferguson also does a really fucking good job as Lady Jessica.
Yeah. I will say, and that's not on her. That's not on her at all. But more in the first one than in this one, like the audio mix is just working against her. She's just very quiet in the mix sometimes, and it's hard to understand what she's saying. But that is not on her. That's
on the sound design. Yes.
Maybe even just the sound system in the theater where it's not. I don't know, but. Like, in the first movie, I legit struggled understanding what she was saying sometimes. But she's great. She's acting her ass off.
She really sells, like, that descent into just, like...
Yeah, and I think Jessica is in many ways a very, very challenging part, because so much of her motivation is entirely internal. Like, she doesn't say why she does things. That is the problem she has with Paul. She doesn't say why she does things, so... Yeah, no, but Rebecca Ferguson is great.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet also put in fantastic performances.
They absolutely carried them. I was... say, when the Timothée Chalamet, I thought, well, it's going to work in the first movie, but he's not going to work as like Paul the soldier, Paul the warrior.
No, he does.
I was completely wrong. He is so good in this.
He blew my expectations right out of the fucking water in the second
Absolutely,
movie.
Like, I did not expect this to work as well as it did. Like, at the end of the first one, it's like, okay, they can pull this off, but this is just...
Nah, he gave it his fucking A game.
Like, yeah, no, and he absolutely did it. Like, he and Zendaya absolutely carried this movie.
And a movie full of stellar performances as it is.
That's the thing. They didn't carry it in the way of without them, the movie is dead. They just carried, like, this is a very good piece, but without those two, it's just, damn.
Yeah, no, it's pretty nuts how well they did in this movie.
Like, yeah, like when everyone brings their A game, the lead needs to absolutely bring their A game, and the leads in this one absolutely did.
Yeah, no, they just crushed it. A lot. It's just so much good stuff in this. Let's not forget, of course, the memes. Look, I'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention the fucking popcorn buckets.
Yeah, no, definitely. Looks
Very
a
funny.
lot like ass.
Very funny stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I like the original Sandworm design better.
Yep. Yep. Oh, I did see it. Someone mentioned that online that'd be very, very funny if there was a post-credit scene with Duncan Idaho's goal popping up. It'd just be a very funny actor nod because, you know, Jason Momoa's
Yeah,
been in a bunch of superhero movies and all that.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, but that doesn't happen for a while.
I know, but it would be very funny. But yeah, also I do want to mention the battle. I do like that they have the battle sequence play out as it does. Like so often you get the thing in the movies where it's like either they don't tell you the plan and the plan goes well, or they tell you the plan and the
Yeah,
plan goes horribly, horribly wrong. This
yeah,
just shows like this is how the tactics will work, and this is the tactics in action.
yeah. I think I mean that works on multiple levels. It works because one, of course, that's Paul's power. Like he says what will happen, and that happens. If that weren't the case,
It'd be
that
weird.
would be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also it does the thing. It tells you why the plan works. Like Paul explains, we do this, and that will lead to that, and that they pull that off really well, I think.
Mm. Oh, here's another fun thing. Austin Butler apparently suggested to the director that he channel his Fade Ralph voice from Stellan Skarsgård's voice, which really cool suggestion if that's the case.
Yeah, good good observation on his part then.
Yeah, it makes sense in this in the.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, this is funny. Sting was very happy with Austin Butler's performance of Fade Ralph 2.
Well, what else was he gonna say?
I mean, fair,
But also fair, yeah. I don't
also,
know. I when stuff like that happens, I always wonder, like, why would they even ask him that? What the fuck's he supposed to say?
fair enough.
It's like it's not like they were gonna cast him in the part. Like they like sure, yeah, good. Especially in a movie like this where literally everything is good.
Yeah. Also, I don't think we mentioned this, but that one bit towards the end where we get the vision of Alia Atreides is just
Yeah, and Anna Taylor-Joy playing her.
yeah, which is also like very brief scene, but damn,
Yeah, I mean now they like she's gonna play her and she got a whole movie out of it.
yep.
It's an
Honestly,
uncredited cameo, but she got a whole movie out of it because she's certainly gonna be in the next one.
I mean she's a really good actress, so there are much worse choices for the
Oh yeah,
part.
you absolutely can't go wrong with Anna Taylor-Joy. Like I don't think she's ever been bad in anything.
Yeah, it's a lot of good casting right there.
Like that's the thing. Like basically, Denis Villeneuve is probably one of the best working directors currently
Oh,
making movies. And
easy top 10 director of our current age.
yeah, and he just brought everyone who's good at their job in
Yeah.
for this movie.
Lest we forget to mention the production crew, who are all
Yeah,
do their
no,
job
absolutely. Like
phenomenally.
the production design is amazing. Like the ornithopters look so good.
The spice
And
harvesters are really cool.
yeah, like the whole balloon thing is really, really cool and not something I've seen before. Like, yeah, it's just really, really well done.
And of course the set designs too, especially for the environments both on Arrakis and off. Like,
Yeah, I think the set design is really good in like I mean, most of this will have been filmed on sound stages, but the sets look gigantic. Like everything looks huge.
either
And
they
that's
did
amazing.
practical or they had really good computer generation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but even like then, like the practical stuff, like you need your actor to stand on some kind of floor and do something, and like everything, like from every angle, just looks so good, and that's yeah, it's just really, really well done.
Like, it's hard not to gush about these movies because they're both very, very, very well made in basically
Yeah,
every way. And
absolutely. Like
most of the critiques that one could levy at them are due to like kind of necessary changes made for the adaptation.
yeah, I mean, sure, there's gonna be like even putting the weird insult shit aside, there's just gonna be people who
Oh
don't
God.
like the adaptation. They'll change. Like there's gonna be people who don't like the changes in good faith, and like that's fine. Like not everything's for everyone, and if you're really deeply into the books in a way where you can't see the story change, then yeah, maybe you'll get pissed at this movie. Sure, why not? But like that's completely fair. But like as adaptation is an art. It's a different art than making a thing. Like adaptation means you need to tease out what you want to make from a thing that has already been made.
Yes.
And that is difficult. And that was really well done with this one.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's just not much else to be said for it, honestly. But, like, damn, this was a very good adaptation.
Yeah.
And
oh, wanna hear my general Dune adaptation nitpick?
Sure.
That every adaptation has done, and that I always get why they do it, but I always wish they found a different way to do it. The Bene Gesserit voice.
Oh yeah,
Which
yeah.
basically every adaptation does is they just speak like this now.
I think they did like a whole Voice of the Legion type shit in the Herbert, not in the Herbert, in the Villeneuve films.
But what I would like, because that's how it is supposed to be in the books. I just shot my voice 1 second. In the books, it's more like cold reading. In the books, it's more they know how to ask for things. They know how to phrase things.
Rather than just like commanding someone to do shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a specific command. It's just they know how to talk to you, and they are so good at that you have no choice but to do what they say. And I get why you can't do that in a movie. That is basically impossible to convey in a movie. But I always think it's kind of sad that they just go with growly voice.
It's kind of hard to adapt the cold reading thing, if we're being honest.
No, as I said, it's definitely a nitpick. Like it's my personal Dune adaptational nitpick because every adaptation has to do the exact thing they are doing. Just modify the voice somehow to make you understand they're using their voice to do a thing.
Yeah.
You can't do it any differently. But I wish, like one day, someone will, and that will make me very happy.
Yep. Yeah, the only things I can really think of that are kind of like nitpicks I have are just like I do wish they had given Thufir the little bit that he had, but they already had so much on their plate.
Yeah, like this movie was already so long. And he was so little in the first one. I understand why they cut him from this one. Like if he were more important in the first one, I would have been more pissed at that. But
his whole subplot in the first half of the book was kind of like cut to nothing because it would have dragged the movie on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also just not the story they wanted to tell, so I get that.
Mm-hmm. Again, it makes sense. It's unfortunate, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, let's be real. If you want to make a movie and you have to focus on, like, the guy who thinks real good or Josh Brolin who can shoot a gun, you're like, well, I want people to watch this, so I'm going to pick Josh Brolin who can shoot a gun.
To be fair, Josh Brolin is very good at acting while shooting guns.
Absolutely. Honestly, I think Josh Brolin has been on a roll since Marvel.
Oh yeah, no. Ever since he played Thanos, even before that, when he was playing Cable, like fucking great.
Yeah, like he was great as Cable. He was very good as Thanos. He was great in Dune. Good for him.
Yeah, I'm glad he's getting good roles. Honestly, it's just
Yeah, he deserves it.
it's an
Like he has
all-star
such a face.
cast too.
Absolutely. Like again, Denis Villeneuve just brought everyone who was really, really good at the specific job they needed to do for this movie.
Yeah. Yep. It's just so good.
Including, just to mention him, Hans Zimmer, of course.
Yep.
Who made...
Has Hans Zimmer ever made a bad soundtrack?
I was just gonna say, I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but he made a very good Hans Zimmer soundtrack for this movie.
Like
it sounds like a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, and you hear it, and you instantly know who made it, but it's good, so yeah, sure, why not?
I mean, the music in this movie is very good, if I'm gonna be honest.
Absolutely. No, definitely.
Beyond the track that's is a meme at this point.
Honestly, I think in the first one it was a little bland and a little blah, but in this one it really works.
Yeah, no. I don't dislike that particular track, by the way. I just like that one. Is fun to meme on.
No, absolutely. It's understandable.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to go wrong with these films. They're very good.
Yeah.
I am glad
they're just long.
It is probably for the best that they skipped out on the kind of sort of orgy scene that is a bit weird in the book. So
yeah, they
probably for the best that they skipped it. That would definitely netted like an R rating at the very least.
I think honestly they skipped out on a lot of let's call it Paul assimilating into Fremen culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that also works to make it less white savior-y.
Yes.
Because this one doesn't really come off as Paul being like the best at being a Fremen. It's just they need a general, and Paul is a really good general.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
And he also basically just Jessica basically hijacks their religion and puts Paul in the Messiah slot, basically.
Exactly.
Which, and makes sense since the Bene Gesserit had engineered this shit from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing. Like that, just I like the way it works in the book better, but that doesn't mean I don't like the way it works here. I just really like the very sci-fi idea of the Missionaria Protectiva, basically nuns going around and telling people legends just so the legends are there. Like, because 10,000 years later, someone might come and use it. Like, I love that idea from a sci-fi writing point of view, but I understand why in this movie they needed to do differently, and it works super well. I love it in this movie, but I like it more in the books. I will say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like, any final thoughts on the book or the movie before we wrap up? Because we've been talking a little while. We don't need to drag it out to the full 2 hours, but...
No, I think I told everyone my little nitpick about the voice.
That's the one thing you wanted to say before signing off. Yeah.
Exactly. I want that on record. No, I really love Dune. At some point, I'm going to read some of the other books and maybe mention them in some other podcast when I'll be here for some unrelated reason, because I don't want to make anyone else read those. But no, I honestly think the first Dune book, everyone who's even remotely interested in not just science fiction, but just good world building and genre literature should give the first Dune book a go.
I am inclined to agree. It can be quite dry at points, but I do think it is worth reading at the very least to get an understanding of why it is so well regarded and so well known. It's just very iconic literature, and it's good to see why it's so influential. But yeah, that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. We do streams on Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Please just give this video give us a follow here on Twitch and on YouTube. Like and subscribe, all that jazz, and thank you very much for tuning in. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.